Hi, everyone. Welcome to another KE Report webinar. I am your host, Corey Fleck, also your host over at the Corlin Economics Report. That is kereport.com. This webinar is also produced in conjunction with Focus Communications. And in this webinar, we are introducing really a brand new company to the markets, Burin Gold. I am chatting with the CEO, Dave Clark. Now, I say Burin is new to the markets because as we are recording this on Monday, November 22nd, the company has approval to list on the TSX Venture Exchange, and the shares will be free trading as of Wednesday. Now, a couple housekeeping items to take care of here. You will have the ability to ask questions. Please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature within this webinar program. I will be introducing or interjecting those questions throughout this webinar as Dave moves through the slides, giving us really a broad overview here of Burin Gold. Now, just to bring everybody up to speed, the company is focused in Newfoundland and Labrador. The company holds the Hickey's Pond Paradise Gold Project. Dave, before we get into the overall presentation here, can you just give our listeners a quick update here, an elevator pitch really on Burin Gold to bring them all up to speed early on, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey, and thanks for having me here today. It is an exciting day to be having this on the day that our stock is listed on the TSX. So it's an opportune moment, and I'm really happy to be here. Burin Gold is a story that started in 2018 over a beer at PDAC, like a lot of mining stories. And it's a story that really it's a fund out of the Netherlands that was looking for ideas for exploration stories in Newfoundland. They wanted to incubate some companies, and this is a place that they wanted to be. And I had some ideas and presented them to the fund, and off we were to the races, and started a private company that has now, after 3 years, successfully listed on the TSX. So over the time that we were operating as a private company, we raised nearly $4 million in private funding. We did a number of exploration programs, and we really raised the profile of the part of Newfoundland that we're in, which is the Burin Peninsula, from a place that hadn't received a lot of exploration to one that I think is now being taken quite seriously as an exploration destination. So it's a story it's moved very quickly. It's been very systematic exploration, and we've moved from just basic ground truthing all the way to drilling last year, and we'll see that in the presentation as we go along. But we have some really exciting results and a full slate of activities planned for the rest of this year and early 2022.
So, Dave, as we progress through some of the disclaimer slides, just a quick comment. You mentioned that the company came together over beers at the PDAC because your team and your investors were focused in this area. Is that the Newfoundland Labrador area? Because there has been such a huge uptake in terms of interest here, all in the last about year and a half.
Yeah, so I think that this, the fund was quite forward thinking. They were thinking about Newfoundland as a jurisdiction, I think, largely before the current excitement really grew to a fever pitch. And it's been great to see it for the province. It's been great to see the success of other explorers. And so we were thinking about Newfoundland as a jurisdiction, I think, before it really kind of became the hot place to be. Certainly hoping that we get to participate in that excitement. It is a great jurisdiction to explore. It's a great jurisdiction for geology. It's got a lot going for it. And we're in a part of Newfoundland that I think is particularly unexplored, even by Newfoundland standards.
Okay, perfect. Let's get into it here, Dave.
All right. Well, here's a standard forward-looking statement disclaimer slide, and I'm also the qualified person for the company. So I authorize all this disclosure. I guess this is kind of starting over and looking at our elevator pitch. This is sort of the company in a nutshell. Really, since 2018, we raised just under $4 million. We've just successfully completed our IPO, so raised just under $7 million with this IPO listing. We've just listed this morning under the ticker BURG. And really, the story that started in 2018 involves taking a large land position in the Burin Peninsula of Newfoundland. This is in eastern Newfoundland, and this land position really encompassed over 20 kilometers of strike of historical gold showings. It's a part of Newfoundland that has been explored periodically. Some great geologists have been on here, but just through a set of coincidences, really. Like, nobody's ever really followed up. Nobody's ever really done systematic work programs. On our entire property package, only 8 pre-existing historical drill holes exist, and they're all within a few hundred meters of one another. So really, this is unexplored territory. Our program since 2018, we did a variety of programs. It all culminated in 2020 with a scout drill program that we put in at our flagship showing at Hickey's Pond. All 6 of the completed holes intersected significant zones of a gram gold, and we'll talk about why that's significant in a little while. Our best diamond drill hole result was 10.8 meters of 4.4 grams at shallow depth, and that was under a channel sample that returned 20 meters of 9.3 grams. These are the results that we've been talking about, to raise the money for this IPO, and we're now really well placed to start a 10,000 meter resource delineation program at Hickey's, with an additional 2,500 meters program plan over some of our high priority targets. And this will be getting underway very shortly. So we expect significant news flow throughout the rest of this year, and certainly starting in 2022. The rest of the presentation is basically to go through these points. But before I start, I think really important to talk about the board of directors and management of the company. We are very lucky to have Phil Walford and Sherry Dunsworth as directors of the company. Phil sits as chair of the board, and Sherry is an independent director. Both Phil and Sherry are very experienced explorationists in Newfoundland, and I think a lot of people would credit the two of them as really being the catalysts for the recent boom in Newfoundland. It was really the recognition that Valentine Lake, which is Marathon Gold's project in Western Newfoundland, holds multi-million ounces, is really what got the ball rolling and got a lot of people interested in Newfoundland. And I think we can trace a lot of the recent excitement to that discovery. And both Phil and Sherry were recognized in 2021 by PDAC with the Bill Dennis Prospector of the Year Award. So I think that's recognition for their work at Valentine Lake. So we're very lucky to have them on board. They've been great mentors and very active directors, and I look forward to having them help me grow this company as we go forward. Myself, I'm a geologist. I've been working in epithermal gold since 2010 and in base metals before that. And this idea for this project came from, this was my idea to start this project, and I have been involved in the company from day one. At a conceptual level, planning the exploration programs, boots on the ground, and all the rest. And then rounding out our board, we have Dan James, who's a friend and colleague from the UK. Dan represents the interests of Plethora Private Equity, which is the Dutch fund that funded us from inception until 2020. And Tom Panulius is a capital markets professional in Toronto who's helping us on the business development side, capital market side.
So Dave, who found this project? Who found the flagship and put it together?
Well, the idea was proposed by me. So, I am not, these are all historical showings, and certainly, a number of geologists, both on the academic side and government side in Newfoundland have been trying to get industry interested in this part of Newfoundland for some time. So these are our historical showings that have just never received the attention to tie them all together and then put a systematic exploration program. So I presented this idea to Dan, who's the co-founder of the company, and Plethora Private Equity back in 2018, and we put the property package together, got the company going, and brought in Phil and Sherry at a later time. Phil came in a financing in 2020, and Sherry came on board a few months after that. So I think they both recognized the potential of this project early on, and so we're keen to be involved. But really, the founding directors of the company would be Dan and myself.
Okay, thank you.
And just to round out, we have a good, excellent, tight management team based here in Vancouver, and I think well placed to grow this team as we go forward. Just very quickly, I guess this is just hot off the press. I just put this together yesterday and today with the final numbers from our IPO, but just to show everybody what the state of the company is going to look like on listing. A lot of numbers here, I guess, but really the salient points would be to point out our 38.3 million shares on listing, so still fairly tight capital structure, not a lot of dilution, and really to point out company insiders still hold just under 20% of the company. Plethora Private Equity, our Dutch private equity fund, still a significant and important shareholder, and New Gold who was an early strategic investor in the company, holding at just under 10%.
When did New Gold come in? You said early, at the beginning, or?
Yeah, they came in on a financing in 2020. So this was prior to our 2020 drill program. We had assembled the drill pack, the property overall had some really promising results. We had these great channel results to talk about, and presented the idea to New Gold as we were contemplating financing. And I think they saw the district scale potential of this as being an actual mineable property, if you find the deposit. And so they were very, very keen to get involved and put in a financing in 2020, and have participated on the IPO as well, to keep their interest just sub 10%.
How about Plethora too? Do they have any special rights for future financings? They are a large shareholder. It sounds like they've been with you from the beginning. Anything else we should know about that relationship?
Yeah, very close relationship. Plethora really deserve all the credit for having the foresight, I think, to see that Newfoundland was going to be a hot place in the world, and have been extremely supportive partners. They financed this company all the way from 2018 through to 2020, have been our largest shareholders, and I think will be very strong supportive shareholders. They believe in this project, and they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere until they see this project developed and see what its real potential is. So, no, they're great. They've been great partners to have.
Okay, final question before we leave here. The pre-IPO capital structure, just over 27 million shares. Pre-IPO, that's a nice tight share structure coming out of the gate. We have seen companies come out with 3 times as many shares. I always do have to ask, because everyone wants to know, are there any really cheap shares that were issued as this company got going?
Yeah, so the founders of the company, myself, Dan James, and a few of the consultants who helped us got the founder shares essentially. Everything else, like Plethora, started funding the company at a 5-cent round, and funded it through 10-cent rounds, 20-cent round, 30-cent round, and 40-cent round. So they funded the company at higher and higher prices as they saw value developed as the exploration programs progressed. So Plethora is fully paid for their shares. And I would point out as well that Phil Walford, our chair, is an important insider. Pre-IPO, he was just under 10%. He'll be diluted a little bit through the IPO, but all of his shares were purchased at that 40-cent level as well. So he's fully purchased at a higher price as well. So I think a lot of people believe in this project, and so there's not a lot of cheap paper kicking around, and it's certainly escrowed through a standard TSX escrow.
Okay. Hey, kudos to you guys. You've been on this project for 3 years, right? 3+ years. That's a tight share structure coming out of the gate.
Yeah, and I think that's a reflection of the way that the Plethora structured the company to start with, to with this goal in mind, to hit the market with a tight share structure that leaves a lot of upside for the incoming investors.
Okay, perfect. Moving on. Thank you.
All right. So back to the fun stuff, the geology. I've shown here a map of many of the gold projects operating at the moment in Newfoundland. Your viewers, I'm sure, will be familiar with many of these or all of these. And to point out where we are on the Burin Peninsula of Newfoundland, in eastern Newfoundland. So first thing to note, and I think this is a really important part of our story, is we are in a different geological terrain than central Newfoundland. So the deposits of central Newfoundland are generally orogenic gold deposits. These would be high-grade, narrow vein deposits. Certainly some of the exciting results we've been seeing coming out of Newfound Gold or Labrador Gold are these high-grade, narrow vein deposits, orogenic deposits that have really been responsible for getting a lot of the excitement in Newfoundland recently. The Burin Peninsula is a volcanic terrain that hosts epithermal gold deposits, and it's important to talk about that. We'll get into that in the geology, but we really need to set the stage for the kind of deposit we're looking for, which is going to be a bulk tonnage, likely open pit mineable project. Which has a lot of advantages when you're looking for them, in the sense that you can grow tonnage very quickly in these types of deposits. And certainly high sulphidation epithermal deposits are some of the most important gold resources around the world. It also explains the reason why this is so unexplored, is that for several decades, really the gold in quartz vein systems of central Newfoundland have commanded a lot of the attention, whereas the epithermal potential of eastern Newfoundland hasn't really been looked at as closely. And I think that's one of the major upsides of our project. So we're located here in the northern part of the Burin Peninsula. Not a lot of neighbors compared to central Newfoundland, not a lot of claims compared to central Newfoundland. And that's really one of the things that back in 2018 attracted me to the project. I thought, boy, nobody's looked here for a long time. There's a lot of upside here that I think is worthwhile looking at.
So because there aren't as many neighbors as we see in other areas in Newfoundland, are you guys going to be expanding on your land position, or are you good with what you have?
Well, I think we have the premier portion of the land package in the northern Burin. We've now been staked around essentially on all directions at this point by a variety of prospectors and other companies. But I'm very happy with the land package we have in the northern part of the Burin. I do think the Burin Peninsula in general has a lot of potential elsewhere. So there's definitely room to grow elsewhere. You know, it's a great district and it has a lot of potential. But for the moment, I think we have a great land package.
Okay, thank you.
The geology of the Burin is very relatively simple. The green rocks here are volcanic rocks. The red rocks are granites, and the yellow lines that I've put on this map show these corridors of epithermal alteration. Now, these corridors have been recognized for several decades. They've been described by academic workers and Government of Newfoundland Geological Survey workers, and there's lots of publications out there that talk about them. And what they haven't really received is a lot of systematic exploration work. And partly that's because there's not a lot of exposure in this part of Newfoundland. It's easy to work in, but there's a lot of very shallow glacial till and shallow bog that covers a lot of this part of Newfoundland. So it's not an area that has a lot of rock outcrop to follow. But these corridors, you can see them popping up. You can see epithermal alteration zones pop up periodically along these corridors. And our land package is really in the northern part where you get these two parallel corridors, sort of northeast, southwest oriented, and encompassing about 20 kilometers of strike over the area of our claims. If we zoom in to that area, which we'll do next, this is a slide I think is really important. And I think it's really important from a project evaluation point of view. And anytime I look at a project, and my background really comes from a project evaluation perspective. I spend a lot of time looking at projects for junior companies that were looking to invest into good projects. And one of the things we do in project evaluation is look for any reason not to invest. All you need is one good reason, and you can just walk away from an investment quite happy. And a lot of these things that you can do, a lot of these reasons to walk away have nothing to do necessarily with the rocks, but have to do with other project killers down the road. And this is one of the reasons I really like this part of Newfoundland is it's such a good place for development if you find mineral resources. And I think this slide kind of captures it all. You can see here in dark blue our land position. You can see in light gray some of the other claims, although this slide is now out of date or state here on the eastern side and on the southern side as well. But really the infrastructure and the location of this project are pretty are very favorable to mineral development. You have the Trans-Canada Highway here on the eastern part of the image. St. John's is about a 2-hour drive away. You have the Burin Highway, which is a regional highway that runs all the way down the spine of the Burin Peninsula, all the way down to Fortune. That's a 2-lane paved highway, 90-kilometer-an-hour limit, so great access there. You have a 138 kilovolt regional power line that runs alongside the highway, so right off the claims. You even have a substation already built, and I believe it is right on the claims. It's connecting this 8-megawatt hydro station to the main line. So you have power, you have road access, you have deep water port. There's the deep water port facility right here on the other side of Placentia Bay. So shipping is there. And then all the things that you don't want to see are not there. If I can use a double negative, you don't have any land claims, you don't have any municipal boundaries, you don't have any watersheds. You don't have any protected areas. You have no caribou herds. You have no registered salmon rivers. All of the things that you would be looking at if you're looking at an early stage project to say, is this a good investment or not, are not here. We've gotten full drill permits back from the government in under 30 days from application, which is, I think, a reflection of how few impediments there are here to exploration. So it's just a great place to be. I think everybody who's seen this area agrees that if you find a sizable deposit here, you'd have very little impediments to development. So it's a great part of Newfoundland. I think one of the best parts of Newfoundland from a development point of view. And I think that's one of the reasons I was attracted to this part the Burin Peninsula to begin with. Our land package is fully owned. We had an option agreement with some local prospectors that was fully executed last year. And so that they have been reduced to a 2% NSR subject to a buyback right for half. And the remainder of the land package is 100% Burin. So it's a very clean ownership structure as well.
Any work commitments that you guys have, or you own it now, you can do what you want with it?
We've fully executed the option agreements. So the work commitments that were originally committed have all been fulfilled. And so that's been, the last payment was made last year. And so those claims have now been transferred to Burin. So they're fully owned by ourselves.
How much is that buyback right for half of that NSR?
Oh, that is it's a half, it's a fairly standard 1% buyback for $1 million.
Okay.
So zooming into the area of the claims, so this whole geological map now is located on the mineral claims, and really the what I want to show here is that the area that has these high sulphidation epithermal showings really covers about 20 kilometers of strike, and it's these pink lines here shown on the map, and they're really punctuated across the whole strike of the system, and none of these have ever been drill tested except for Hickey's Pond itself. You can see the work programs that we've put in since 2018. So we have some airborne VTEM coverage over some of the areas. Now, we don't have full coverage because we were operating under reduced budgets. That is something we'll be doing very shortly, is getting a full VTEM survey over this entire area. But we get some very interesting results on the VTEM, and we'll be looking at those shortly. But really to show that we have a wide area, district scale play, a lot of showings that are historical in nature. Each one of these showings has some really interesting features, and none of them have ever been drill tested with the exception of Hickey's Pond. What got us really interested in this area, and I think what showed a lot of people that this has some actual real mining potential, is the channel sampling program we did in 2018. The Hickey's Pond showing is quite an old showing. It's been around since the 1930s. It was actually originally looked at as a source of potential iron in the 30s. So a lot of geologists have been on it. A lot of geologists have sampled it, and everybody has always noted that there was high-grade gold at Hickey's Pond. But when we went there for the first time in 2018, we realized that it had never really been systematically channel sampled. Like, it had never seen a proper saw cut across the width and breadth of it to really evaluate it from an overall volume perspective. And that's one of the first work programs we put in, was do some very simple drill, saw cut channel samples across the outcrop. And we got these incredibly encouraging results. These are three of the better results. So 5 meters of 22 grams, 20 meters of 9 grams, 16 meters of 6 grams. And we identified 2 ore hosts on surface. The first is this left-hand photo, which is a classic visible vuggy quartz unit, which has, in this case, some visible gold. Really, the gold is generally microscopic and is hosted in these cracks and these vugs. And this is very similar, analogous to a modern system in a high sulphidation epithermal environment where gold is hosted in vuggy quartz units. We also uncovered under shallow till, and this was just with some shovels, like standard, like just moving a bit of earth with shovels, a gold copper tenantite breccia, and that is a new unit to be found there at Hickey's Pond, and that's a really interesting unit. That's where we get the highest gold grades in general. We had a 7-meter intercept of 19.7 grams of gold and 3.68% copper in that channel. It's in this gold copper tenantite breccia. So the black mineral in this breccia is tenantite, which is a copper arsenic sulfosalt. And the gold is hosted in microscopic amounts in and around that tenantite. So it's a really interesting unit to find. We'll see that later, because it is a typical ingredient that one finds in the feeder systems of high sulphidation environments.
So Dave, just to set expectations here, you started off by saying this asset most likely will be some sort of a large-scale open pit style asset. But these grades, these are really high grades, especially for an open pit mine. What should investors be expecting, though? I'm assuming not these high grades if you do think it's an open pit system.
Well, I think it has the potential for high grade as well. I mean, what you see in modern systems is that the feeder systems of high sulphidation deposits tend to have the high grades. And those high grades can be very appreciable. So in our case, at this early stage, I think that we have the potential for both. I think that we can build tonnage quickly in that larger vuggy quartz, lower grade environment, and that's hopefully going to end up in that 2 to 5 gram range. And we have the potential as well for this copper gold tenantite breccia, which could be hosting a feeder structure and could very well be a sort of a vein geometry like system. Now, we haven't hit this in core yet, but we see a 7-meter intercept of it on surface. So, I think in terms of looking at that upside, you're looking at, well, can we hit this in core? And what would 7 meters of 20 grams gold look like in a core intercept? I mean, that is a possibility. It's one of the reasons we get into exploration, is because you see these alluring things on surface and you wonder, could we hit this at depth? We'll see in our drilling, we haven't hit this unit in depth but we have it on surface. So yeah, I think that, what I want investors to be thinking about here is that the company is going to be trying to build up what looks to be a mineable resource in that overall volume of vuggy quartz, and building up volume within that unit. That's what we think it will look like looking at the modern equivalents of these kinds of systems, and being mindful of the fact that we're also going to be hunting at the same time for those higher grade portions. And I think that copper gold tenantite breccia has the potential to be an important ore host. It's just not been intercepted in drill core yet.
Okay. Really just goes into how early stage this is too, right? With 8 drill holes before you guys even got the ground, clearly there's a lot more exploration to do.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that, hundreds of people have stepped on Hickey's pond, the showing itself, and this was just hiding under like literally 30, 40 centimeters of till. It just, like pretty hard packed till, but all you needed was a shovel and a couple of hours of work. And that's, that 7-meter intercept was uncovered. So I think that shows, there's a lot of potential here. It's just not received the systematic attention that it needs.
Okay. Ren, briefly, a quick question came in, ties in perfectly with this discussion. Have you seen any oxide material near surface?
No, this has been straight sulfide material. Yeah, okay. There's the environment of Newfoundland is not really, doesn't have the same weathering profile that you would find in say, Mexico or the Andes. And so you don't really get any oxidation near surface. It's straight sulfide. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that, when we got those 2018 channel sample results, one of the first things we did is IP resistivity over the area sort of adjacent to the showing. And that's this small inset here. You can see the small inset geophysical plan map is the results of the chargeability from the IP survey. And we followed that up with a larger VTEM survey. And I think the first thing to note here is just how well the chargeability in the IP resistivity survey matches up with the airborne inductively induced polarization product that's generated from the VTEM survey. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's essentially a proxy for chargeability. And in this particular case, it seems to be working quite well, because you can see all of these features that we see in the chargeability extend off onto the VTEM, and they match very, very nicely indeed. So what we interpret the chargeability to be related to here is the pyrite, and it's just a disseminated pyrite halo that surrounds or is part of the mineralized or the alteration system. It's not the mineralization itself, but it certainly seems to be part of the alteration system. That is what we see in the drill core at Hickey's Pond, and we'll look at that shortly. But what we see elsewhere is that we have a 7-kilometer long anomaly, certainly with some features which may be folding, maybe structural repetition from faulting. There's certainly a bit of complexity here, but we see this trending over 7 kilometers, and we've only drill tested about 10% of it over about 400 meters right here on the southern end of Hickey's Pond, and hit appreciable intervals of over 1 gram gold in each of those holes. So we have a system that's 7 kilometers long. It's been tested only in a small area. The rest of it is under shallow till or under shallow bog. There's really no outcrop to speak of anywhere on this southern side, and none through here. There's some glacial eskers that run through here. So really you have a system that's shallowly covered, but really needs to get some basic exploration. 7 kilometers long, lots of potential here for mineral resources all the way along this.
So how are you going to go about attacking this? 7 kilometers long. it's a lot to test.
Yeah, I think you start out. This is one of the advantages of these types of deposits. Is that, they tend to have fairly large alteration footprints. You don't have to drill them off at 10-meter contour, 10-meter centers. You can start out with much bolder step outs. And in fact, that probably dovetails quite nicely with the next slide. It just shows you the drilling that we did in 2020, which were bold step outs. We started right on the Hickey's pond showing, which is this little knob here on the south side of the pond. And then we put in some 100-meter step out, a 300-meter step out, and you're still in the alteration system. So what that means is for the rest of that system, you can proceed putting in some scout level holes every 150 meters, every 200 meters. That'll be to be discussed as what the actual step out centers are. But we can test this with not a huge amount of drilling in either direction to test the extent of the alteration system that we see in the VTEM, because it's really unknown. What is there? The reason that we started here is because this is the only spot that we actually have a bit of outcrop jutting out right here, and that's the historical showing. So what this slide shows is really the intercepts that we got, and I think this is another really interesting and important thing for potential investors to consider is that you look at these and it's important to differentiate these types of results from what we see coming out of central Newfoundland. You're not going to see in this type of deposit a meter of like 500 grams gold. That's not the type of deposit it is. What you are going to see are large mineable widths of lower grade mineralization, but that are near surface. Like if you look at, say, hole 1, from 16 to 36 meters, you got 20 meters of a gram. In hole 2, well, right from surface, you got 58 meters of 1.1 gram, and that includes 10.5 meters of 4 grams. You get these long intervals essentially of mineable bulk tonnage material, and it's maybe not quite as sexy at first glance as these high grade narrow vein deposits, but it's also comes with an ability to build tonnage quickly and see a real mineable resource grow very, very rapidly. And that's what we're going to be focused on, is really finding the centers. And really what we're looking for are those vuggy quartz intervals, which are these 10.8 meters of 4 grams portions of this drilling, and really build up tonnage within that with that halo of lower grade mineralization around it. What we're seeing emerge already from this scant amount of scout drilling is a sheet-like body, and maybe that's the best time to go to this slide. We're already seeing a sheet-like body of mineralization which is caught up in this shear zone. So the sort of salmon-colored interval here is the shear zone. You have the granites on the northwest side. You have these schists on the southeast side, and you're really looking at a Burin system. So a system that's going to pinch and swell. It's in a deformation zone, but it carries appreciable grades and widths near surface, which look to be eminently bulk mineable if you can knit it together and get enough tonnage there. So we have this hole 2, 58 meters of 1 gram, and that includes that 10 meters of 4 grams on near surface, and you can see continuity going to depth. So we're seeing from this very early drilling potential for continuity along strike, potential for continuity to depth, open in all directions, and really an exciting start to drilling.
Well, it's saying something too that you hit gold mineralization over a gram per ton in 6 out of a total of 6 holes.
Yeah, well, we had one hole that was lost. The bit was lost and the drill string was lost before we hit target depth. So that was the hole to the northeast. That will be a redrill, I think, in this next drill program. That was a lost hole. But the holes that did go to the completion, all intersected significant intervals of over a gram. And the other thing to note, I think, in this type, I'm not sure if viewers can see the yellow text here. This is a screenshot showing the interval from that 10.8 meters of 4 grams, and it's really to show the consistency of grade. That's another important part of an important aspect of these high sulphidation deposits, is you really look at consistent grade throughout it. So it's not a question where you have a half meter of very high grade surrounded by many meters of much lower grade material. Once you're in the ore zone in this type of system, you have consistent grades. So in our case, you're looking at 4.4, 3, 4.4, 1.9, a little half a grammer, 1.3, 18, 5, 2. It's a really consistent grade, and that's the kind of thing that will make it much more easy, I think, to build up that mineable tonnage as we proceed with this drilling. This is a slide I like to show because I like to talk about what it could mean. You know, sometimes it's hard to evaluate what these early stage plays, like what's the significance of them? Like, how can you put this in context and think about where you might end up a few years down the road, which is really what we need to be thinking at this stage. And this is a study that Kenorland Minerals put together last year, and I thought it was a really good study. They clearly did a lot of work on this, and it's published on their website, so I'd encourage anyone to go and look at it. But what they did was they looked at early stage results of properties that eventually ended up in the multi-million ounce territory across Canada. And so I've replotted some of their data here showing many of these multi-million ounce gold deposits. The x-axis on the graph here shows how many ounces were in that deposit when it was all said and done. Like when they finished the drilling years later, how many ounces did they have? And you can see, that whole range from 2 million ounces to multiple tens of million ounces. And then on the y-axis, you're showing the grade thickness intercept of the best drill hole in the first program that identified something significant. So the grade thickness intercept is you take the average grade of an interval and you multiply it by its thickness, and that gives you a number that is grade times thickness, essentially. And it's a useful metric to evaluate, how significant a drill intercept is, because you could have a very wide intercept of low grade or a very narrow intercept of very high grade, and they could both be significant. This is just a tool that we use to evaluate how significant these things can be. So what Kenorland did is they went back through the record and they found all these initial drill programs, and they said, what did that first drill hit look like? Was it huge? Was it little? And then they plotted that against what the eventual grade endowment ended up being. And what they found statistically was they found that 2 million ounce deposits plus tended to have an initial drill intercept in the first discovery program that was greater than 50 gram meters. And that length of that initial intercept tended to be over 5 meters. So 50 gram meter per ton lines up right here on this line. The yellow line is our discovery hole, 65 gram meters per ton, and that's in that hole too. So that's 58 meters of 1.12 grams, I believe. So it shows you that we plot here on that line. What does this mean? Well, it means, I think, just that we have great ingredients, that we started out with an early stage program, not a lot of drilling, and we got a discovery drill hole that has the potential to be very significant. It doesn't tell you where you end up. It doesn't guarantee that you end up on this graph, of course, but it tells you that you have all of the right ingredients and that you compare very favorably with some very important Canadian gold discoveries. The other thing they found was that the amount of drilling that you do on that initial program is important. That if you do less than 4,000 meters of drilling on that first program and you still get a 50 gram meter intercept, that's statistically significant down the road. In our case, we did 1,026 meters of drilling last year on this initial program, and we got our best intercept of 65 gram meters. So I think it's a useful slide because it provides context. It shows you, we're early days, but we could end up anywhere on this graph, really. We have a lot of potential to move forward. So I commend Kenorland for this study, because I thought it was a really neat way of looking at all this historical data.
So essentially, it's a good start. Right?
Yeah.
You guys had the first program. You're in the right group of companies here. So prove it out, I guess. It shows
you that you have something that statistically is significant in the context of Canadian multi-million ounce gold discoveries. It's no guarantee, of course, it never is. This is exploration, but it tells you have those initial ingredients that are important.
Got it. Okay.
And then getting back, we were talking about that copper gold tennantite breccia, and you were asking a question about the potential of high grade. This is a cartoon. It shows what a modern high sulphidation epithermal deposit looks like. It shows the ingredients that you get in a high sulphidation epithermal system. And all of these labels on this graph refer to specific parts of a high sulphidation system that you tend to have. Why I'm showing this, we have all of these ingredients across the property. We have the residual quartz carrying the gold at Hickey's Pond, so that's that 10 meters of 4 grams. We have quartz alunite around it. Those are the units at Hickey's Pond that have that 0.2 to 0.6 gram halo around the higher grade mineralization. We have lithocaps. Lithocaps are big silica bodies that typically carry no gold, but they're associated with or adjacent to the gold-bearing portions of these systems. We have for the first time demonstrated that we have this red sort of feeder system mineralization, which in the modern environment tends to be energite and gold. We have that as well. That's that copper gold tenantite breccia. Tenantite is a very close mineral species to energite. A lot of clay alteration, which is the right type of clay, and we have big structures which are running right down the Burin Peninsula. So all of these ingredients that we see in modern systems, we see them across the property in sort of a district sense, and we see them at the outcrop scale in a number of these showings. And that's dovetails nicely with this slide, which is really zooming back out again and looking at the overall property. So we've been talking about Hickey's Pond in the northeast side of the property. You'll recognize that 7-kilometer long AIIP anomaly, which is untested. And then we zoom out to the overall property. So you'll notice we're missing a lot of geophysical coverage. You'll notice here these orange dots are all the historical showings. Each one of these showings has interesting features typical of high sulphidation systems, the right type of clay alteration minerals, gold in rock chips up to a gram, up to 1.5 grams in places, all the right structural alignments. And none of these have ever been drilled with the exception of the holes at Hickey's Pond. At Tower down here, we completed a little bit of VTEM over here. We have a great VTEM anomaly, which covers the historical showing at Tower. We have large budines of epithermal quartz. Those are those lithocaps. They don't carry gold, but they're adjacent to float, which is diving down into the bog that runs to 1 gram. So overall, you've got 6 kilometers of trend here in this northwestern belt of showings. Never seen a drill hole. And you've got several kilometers at Tower, and then the 7-kilometer strike of alteration here at Hickey's Pond. You've got a showing down at Chimney Falls, which has some historical rock chip samples. All of this stuff is at a very basic stage of exploration. So it really points to the overall district potential of the property. All of it needs basic work, which we have a plan for, and needs some drilling work at Hickey's Pond, Tower, and then moving on to the rest of these targets.
So I understand large project early on. It might be too early to even answer this, but do you see multiple deposits coming out of this project, or do you see one massive deposit?
Well, I see the potential for multiple deposits. When you see alteration of this kind over a large scale, you know that you're dealing with what was probably a large brittle fault system back in the Neoproterozoic when these systems were being emplaced. And you know that these systems operate on district scales today. If you look at mining projects in Mexico, for example, in this type of environment, you'll see that mines tend to line up along structural fabrics. Like they tend to be aligned. You can have a mine and head frames all in a row. So I think that the potential here certainly has the potential for multiple deposits. I think it's very early stage, so it's impossible to know at this stage what we'll end up with. I think that we see that potential. Like I don't see that Hickey's Pond is necessarily the best spot on this property. It's just one spot where we actually have some rock exposure, and we've been able to put in a little bit of drilling. The footprint of an open pit, high sulphidation system tends to be a few hundred meters across. So, when you have a 7-kilometer long trend like here in the northeastern part, all of which looks like it's associated with hydrothermal alteration, it's easy to imagine that you could have multiple open pit projects across that. This is what we're going to have to drill. But I also think that Hickey's Pond itself, just by itself, certainly has the potential for that, discovering a significant resource right there. So I think to answer your question, all those ingredients are there for potentially finding multiple ore deposits across this property, but it's again very early days, so it needs some basic work to build up the geological story around some of these showings, get some basic data collection, and work towards a drill program across all of them.
So is the Tower area, is that ready to drill, or is it right now really just the Hickey's Pond area?
No, Tower, I would say Tower is the next on my list of things to drill. It's Tower is actually particularly easy. There's a government maintained dirt road that runs right through the property in the southern half here. So you're actually literally right off the road. It's a very easy project to set up on. We already have geophysics covering Tower. There's a bit of rock exposure there. So a past operator had spent a bit of time clearing off a bit of rock exposure. So there's a lot of data already at Tower. It's just never seen a drill hole before. So Tower will be part of our pipeline of projects that, once we move to a second drill on the project, we'll be starting a tower, I suspect.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
And that kind of shows us where we are, you know, where we started in 2018. You know, we progressed through with some systematic work programs. We did a lot of work programs I just haven't had time to talk about today, but, you know, still have some really interesting features to follow up on in our biogeochem and our prospecting geology programs. We followed that up with the IP resistivity survey, the airborne survey. We did our drill program in 2020. We had a little COVID-related break in the middle here, but successfully went back and completed our program in late 2020. And we've been working on our IPO, which is just successfully completed today. And then going forward, we expect that we'll be able to start our airborne survey very shortly to cover the rest of that program. And starting in Q1 2022, we'll be mobilizing with a drill, and we have a big, you know, a resource level program planned for Hickey's Pond, and some scout level drill program planned for the rest of the drill program, or drill package rather.
How deep are you going to be drilling those holes, part of that 10,000 meter program at Hickey's Pond?
I think what we're going to start, you know, we're going to be looking at putting, you know, 2 to 3 drill hole per section. Right now, the system is open to depth. We know that in some of the, you know, analog deposits to this, you can have, these things can extend to depth for several hundred meters. So I'd be looking to try to extend the depth extent of this testing to, you know, 300 meters-ish in this first pass. Like, we really want to try to start to build that potential for the open pit scenario. So, you know, you can start with a fan of drill holes, or drill holes on section, and really put 2 to 3 drill holes per section, run these across a few kilometers, and you can easily drill a 10,000 meter program in fairly short order.
Okay. And it sounds like you'll be testing pretty much all of that 7 kilometer strike, I guess? Well,
I think at a resource level scale, we're going to be starting basically centered on Hickey's Pond and moving outwards. And I would be looking to advance you know, some more aggressive drill holes across the rest of that 7 kilometer strike to test it and see, are we still in the alteration zone? Is it still looking like the right kind of stuff? And then we can, you know, proceed systematically in either direction on that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And that really kind of is the story. It's been a fairly simple exploration story. We've proceeded quite systematically from 2018 until 2020. We've had great partners who've, you know, believed in the property and funded it through to 2020. Brought in New Gold in 2020 when they saw the potential for the, you know, the mining potential of the system if we find a significant resource. And that drilling has really given us the results we needed to complete a successful IPO. We now have just under $6.5 million in the bank, and we're going to be, you know, deploying this cash very, very shortly. We expect a lot of news flow in early 2022. We'll be drilling, you know, hopefully by end of January for sure, and have a lot of drilling plans. So it's going to be an exciting time for the company, and I've been really looking forward to getting to this spot and being able to get back and do what we really want to do, which is get back on the ground and start testing the property.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of exploration to be done, but exciting now that you have the money in the bank. And a quick question following up on the cash then is, what's the budget for this program coming up next year?
Yeah, so I mean, we had, as part of the IPO, we had to put together a range of budgets for the possible outcomes of the IPO. I'm really pleased that this IPO was you know, nearly fully subscribed, so we raised much closer to the top end scenario. So the technical report on the property recommends you know, a significant drill program. It recommends a significant amount of geophysics. And a number of follow-up programs, you know, to test the geophysics with some trenching or with some you know, more basic techniques. So the budget that we currently have for the IPO was fully disclosed in the prospectus. Anybody can go take a look at it. But really, it's following the recommendations of the technical report. I expect that, you know, we have out of that IPO raise, we have a good amount of flow through shares. Obviously, all of that goes directly to the ground, and the hard dollars will largely go to the ground as well. We intend to put the vast majority of this money straight into the ground where it should go to test the project. So we'll be working on that in the coming weeks, putting together a formal budget for the board and getting to work on that. But it will, you know, I think we can accomplish pretty much what we said we would do in the prospectus, which is really to get out and start testing Hickey's Pond systematically and start testing some of these outboard targets.
Rightfully so. Yeah, you've done a lot of the work just building up to there. Now you have the cash to go test it. One final question before I get you out of here deals with the tradable float as you guys come out of the gate when the stock starts trading. Do you have a ballpark number for us?
Yeah, I think if we go back to the capital structure slide, I'm not sure if there's a shortcut to get back.
Unfortunately not.
We have to just go back through them one by one.
Just hang with us as we move back there.
In the small print on the capital structure slide, it has the total number of shares held in escrow, and they are just around 20 million, I believe. So I'm just going to go back here. There we go. Yeah, 20.8 million common shares. So that's essentially 3/4 of the pre-IPO common shares are escrowed, or just over half of the overall float post-IPO. So all of the early shares are escrowed essentially. Insiders are all escrowed. So the float that we'll be trading on listing is the 38.3 million minus 20.8 million.
Okay.
So just around 18 million shares.
Okay. Perfect, Dave. We've gone through all the questions here, so I'll give you just maybe a couple more minutes to just kind of summarize everything for everyone who tuned in, understanding now that it sounds like, well, the company is going to be fairly aggressively exploring this. It sounds like very early on next year. So what do you want to leave everybody with?
Well, I think we've done our homework. We've done a lot of work to get here. The project's fully permitted. There's not going to be any delays. We already have a 50 drill hole permit in place. We have some very experienced Newfoundland explorationists. So we already have a drilling company lined up. The contracts for that should be signed hopefully imminently. We are in a position to hit the market at the same time as we start hitting the property. I would not expect that we'll have a long delay here before we start generating news. So it's a story that people can buy into, expecting to get significant news flow early on. We'll be there. We'll be drilling in January 2022 and testing the property as recommended in the technical report, in a systematic, disciplined way. And I think we have a solid plan. I think we have a really good management, really excellent board, very supportive shareholders, and I am very much looking forward to getting to work and hopefully getting a healthy return for everybody who participated to date and all the people who are going to hopefully participate in the future.
All right, Dave, we will wrap it up here. Thank you for sharing this new story to everybody. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for sending in your questions. If you have any follow-up questions on the back of this webinar, you can always email me, Fleck, that is Fleck, @kereport.com. I will bring Dave back on the show on the back of some more news to follow up with how the story is progressing and answer any of your questions. So again, Dave, everybody, thanks for taking time with us today to learn more about Burin Gold.
Thank you very much, Corey. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody's time who tuned in.